Hello my friends, my family, esteemed colleagues. I was asked to talk a little bit about gallbladder because it has become quite a common problem to have stones in gallbladder not working properly. And doctors resource to the only thing what they are being told to do, which is basically surgery and get it out. It's not that important. Well, it is that important, especially when we eat correctly. Now, when we don't eat correctly, of course, things goes haywire, and all of a sudden, certain organs become less relevant, and certain organs get overburdened. This is especially happening with organs which are directly involved in a process of digestion and cleansing, like, for example, liver or pancreas. And why is this so? Well, because change of diet triggers changes ambient in our body, triggers certain changes in the way the body will function, which means genes get involved to present different blueprint to cells in which they will follow and do what is necessary to be able for the cell and for the body to survive with those changes. Now, the most drastic change we have ever made is when we started eating plant food. Plant food, the food that is meant for plants, which is glucose, dietary glucose. This is why it is basically separated from animals with the cellulose. So animals, in the case they eat it, they cannot really digest it. So glucose is being expelled because it is within cellulose. But once when we cook or process our food, we destroy cellulose, and then glucose becomes available and makes a horrific stuff in our body. And consequences are long-lasting because it's an accumulative problem. And when we are talking about gallbladder especially, well, what is a gallbladder? Liver produces a certain elements that are pushed into the intestine to be able to liberate triglyceride, fat, and make it absorbable. Because fat cannot absorb itself through the wall of a cell as a triglyceride. So the glycerol has to be first taken out. And for this, bile is produced by liver, and then it is being directed into the intestine and to the first part of thin intestine after the stomach, where it gets mixed with the food. Now, body is robot, has sensors and switches. And when food is sensed, proper food, and why is it proper food? Because the only reason why you need the bile to be secreted is for fats, especially triglycerides, not cholesterol. Why not cholesterol? Because cholesterol is basically fatty acids pinned to a protein, and the stomach acid breaks the protein down into amino acids. So now you have amino acids and fatty acids fine for absorption. So you don't need bile, you don't need liver in this case. But triglyceride, and this is basically the fat that we eat, deposited fat that when you are buy animal, when you buy chicken, the yellow fat that you see on it, especially under the skin, this is deposited triglyceride. So when we talk about animal fat, we are not referring to cholesterol, we are referring to triglyceride. Although most doctors don't even think about it because we are trained not to think, just repeat nonsense, and then they tell you, oh, don't eat fat, no pork because it's a lot of fat in there and it's bad for your cholesterol. In which way? Okay, well, anyway, so it's not bile that is being produced by liver and goes into intestine is to deal with triglyceride. It basically separates glycerol from the fatty acids, so then the fatty acids can be absorbed. Glycerol can be absorbed separately. And now, when we eat, when we eat correctly, we will eat a variety of things with more or less fat on it. So you are eating meat, just pure meat of an animal, not much fat may be in there. So your need for bile to be secreted in the intestine is quite low. Again, remember, things are very much controlled through sensors and switches. And if small amount of fat comes in, small amount of bile is going to be secreted. Since sometimes, and everybody who is meat eater loves to eat the fat because fat is yummy, it's where all the flavors are. So when we eat fat, all of a sudden way more bile has to be secreted. Now liver may not be able to produce in one point that much bile that is going to be needed for this amount of fat that came suddenly into our intestine. So this is why, by design, there is on a duct that carries the bile from the liver to the intestine, there is one sac that is formed in which goes bile. So liver steadily produces bile which goes into that sac. Now, of course, steadily I mean because if you are daily eating a diet that contains meat and fats, triglycerides, then of course production will be going, but secretion will be controlled by the level of the fat that is in the meal that you are taking. Now, if you eat something very fatty, more bile will be needed and liver will produce, and this is why it comes from a gallbladder, from the sac that is basically a storage, is a tank for bile. Now, what happens when you start eating the wrong diet? Well, we go to veganism, vegetarianism. Now you are not going to be taking much of triglyceride at all. So what is happening? You get a stagnation. Production was going, you have a bile, and now bile sediments. Okay, production of bile is going to slow down almost to zero when you eat incorrectly, when you eat these plant foods. And what happens is that now the bile is going to be sitting there because there is no need for it. Add to this general dehydration, and what happens? You are going to have a problem now that the bile by itself is going to get denser. And now the bile, what bile has? Bile has in it salts that it uses, bilirubin also, but has basically salts and has one thing that is necessary also for decomposition, which basically it needs to, since bile is coming right after the stomach is pushing in, so it's the first few inches of the intestines, what comes in there, if it's meat, meat always gets processed with a lot of strong hydrochloric acid in the stomach. Although it is not going to be pushed into the intestine until it basically neutralizes with the sodium bicarbonate that is also produced in the lining of the stomach. Still, the acidity is going to be higher than intestines would like. And this is why the bile also contains a buffer. And we know this buffer that alkalizes acid is phosphatase, alkaline phosphatase, which makes the bile quite alkaline. And now taking through observation, we know that when we eat plant food, when we load up on carbohydrates, liver cannot store them as such. So it turns them into fat. And in the process, it produces uric acid. Now, uric acid has to be dealt with. So phosphatase is going to be taken out from liver as much as possible. But since there is too much of acid going on, so it is going to be pulled from the bones, from osteoclast, because osteoblast, it needs to alkalize the area to sediment back calcium and salts into the bone. But because it's needed to keep blood alkalized when we eat garbage food, plant food, then it's being reassigned to be excreted into a bloodstream and to go and alkalize as a buffer, alkalize the blood. Now, since the alkalizers, the buffers were pulled from the bone, whenever there is a small issue with the bone and bone has to rebuild itself, well, it will use osteoclast to acidify the area, to dissolve the salts, and then those salts go into the bloodstream, circulate until they will be used to resediment again with alkaline area. Now, since the buffer was pulled out of the bone, so osteoblasts cannot do the sedimentation. So all the calcium and all the salts which are now circulating has no purpose. And more problems with bone you have, you make bad step, a little injuries, and bone wants to rebuild, resolve, to restructure itself, but it cannot rebuild. So our bones becoming more and more porous, and all this calcium and salts now they start being eliminated because it's too high level in the blood. But as the high blood level of these salts is there, and especially we have now area in gallbladder, which is highly alkalized. So now when these salts come there, they start sedimenting. And you have, what is in gallbladder? Calcium and salts. Well, this is because there is too much calcium in the blood and salts from the bone, which body is trying to save, preserve, so it can resediment them, but they cannot be resedimented, so as it goes over the radar, over the censored approved level, they are being urinated out, they are being eliminated, but because of the high level of these salts and calcium, they find themselves also in a kidney, and they find themselves in a gallbladder, and because gallbladder is quite alkaline, it has buffer that it needs for its work. Now it will sediment these minerals and create stones. So you want to, now doctors are being told, well, these stones, now we can do nothing with them. I mean, you have to cut them out. So you don't need gallbladder, we just take this whole thing out. Well, yeah, vegans and vegetarians, they really don't need gallbladder. But people who eat the correct food, they need gallbladder. Now what happens if these victims of modern medicine wake up and start realizing that their health is going to toilet and they need to change diet and they want to start eating correctly, which means animal products, but now they don't have any more gallbladder because it was cut out by the expert of medicine. Well, now body has a difficulty because when you eat something that has little fat in it, like chicken breast, you know, veal, but without the fat parts, then everything is fine. But as soon as you start eating some of the good stuff, some of the tasty fat, well, now bigger amount of bile is needed, and now you don't have a reservoir from which body can squeeze some, and you cannot digest these fats, and you start feeling sick because they just cannot be absorbed. They bring you nausea because now become toxic, body wants to get them out. So what can we do? Well, luckily the body is much smarter than our experts are, and it is going to start adjusting. Again, the genes go in action, and they start giving instruction for the bile duct in the liver to start increasing. So now you will have bile ducts increasing in volume, and they can store some of the bile. And if you switch to the proper diet and you don't have any more gallbladder, start increasing your triglyceride intake, your animal fat intake, gradually. Okay, so start with lean meat, then lean meat with a little bit of skin. Skin has more fat in it, and then a little bit more and more and more fat, and body will see what it needs, and it is going to be adjusting. And after a while, and you don't have to wait a long time, after a couple months, you will be able to eat basically normally. Of course, if you get overboard and there is some nice piece of tasty fat and you start chewing on it and it may be you're getting too much, you may have a little problem still. But basically with a regular diet and eating pork, for example, with its fat, you can adjust your body to work well even without gallbladder, because it will broaden, widen the ducts, bile ducts, and it will preserve bile in there. So we don't have to be panicky about it. The thing is that we can get rid of gallbladder stones. How? Number one, correct your diet. So there will be requirement for bile. And same like if the gallbladder was out, you start increasing the fat slowly. And drink a lot of plasma. because now you have to change the environment. As you change your diet, which you have to eliminate glucose, carbohydrates, now you will start also sedimenting properly calcium and salts in your bones. So your bones are going to be stronger. Your osteoporosis will stop, osteopenia, and you will start getting buildup again of the bones. And there will be much less calcium in the blood to create problems. And body will slowly dissolve the stones which are in gallbladder. They will dissolve. Much faster way to do it is, again, following Cell Healer's protocol, because that's all the instructions you have right there for everything, because it's basically instruction of how to live healthy, and when you do that, the body will readjust and repair. But there also in the protocol you will notice there is a usage of pulsar, which is a Bob Beck's blood electrifier, which speeds up the hydration process. It electrifies the blood and increases magnetic fields, and this also helps to dissolve the stones in a gallbladder much faster. So for that purpose, I definitely recommend it. If you have a problem with gallbladder stones, do that. And you will dissolve these stones. There is no problem. Don't worry about it. In no way listen to suggestions of brainwashed doctors if their knowledge is strictly from books. And the higher title they have, this is definitely book title and book knowledge. I would not listen to one single word that they have to do. They are great diagnostics, they have great instruments to diagnose, but then when you want to heal, they have no clue. So it's basically cut. Okay, poison, cut, and burn. This is the modern medicine. So for healing, you have to go to healer. And this is why they are called healers. If, again, they know what they are doing. But with this knowledge, you don't need anybody. You just follow the self-heal protocol and heal yourself. Simple as that. I think I made some sense into this issue. And this is not theory, this is proven. I've helped many people. I've seen them healing. So this is not experimental medicine. This is new knowledge that we should have had a long time ago. Thank you for listening. Till next time. Love you all.